Hello once again, it's Matthew from Matthew North Music here, and as usual, if you like these videos or you find them interesting, please think about hitting the like and subscribe buttons below, and if you click the little bell icon, then you'll be notified every time that there's a new video uploaded. Anyway, today we're talking about the Beatles once again. Now, the Beatles have released many compilation albums. I've got a few here. We've got the first proper compilation, which was a collection of Beatles oldies from '66. I've got an overseas one from the '60s here called the Beatles Greatest Hits. Then, of course, there's the most famous of all, which are the Red and the Blue album, and I've got a copy of the Red album here. And, you know, they're great albums, and, you know, the Beatles deservedly have had many compilation albums over the years. However, there's one album that came out in 1966 that you may not be aware of. Now, Pete Best, as you know, was the original drummer of the Beatles. He joined the band when they started, more or less. I think they had a couple of drummers before Pete, but, you know, he did all the Hamburg stuff with them. And while they were in Hamburg, they recorded a session for Bert Kaempfer. And if you ever want to hear those recordings, if you pick up a copy of this, which is called The Beatles featuring Tony Sheridan, it's on the Contour label, which was a spin-off of Pickwick, but I think they were pressed by Polydor, and it was Polydor Studios in Germany where the Beatles recorded those sessions. You can normally pick this album up for no more than £5, and the sound quality is absolutely superb. So if you want to hear those tracks on vinyl, then this album's probably the album for you. Now, these recordings were also released in America in the 60s. They were issued in 1965. And the label that they were issued on was the same label that released the album that I'm going to be talking about today. They were called Savage Records. Now, I've got no idea where they were from, but they released the tracks as the Savage Young Beatles. And that unofficial album has stayed in print through one way or another up until the present day. There's been various reissues of it, there's been picture discs of it, there's been CDs of it. There's been a whole plethora of releases of the Hamburg recordings, and they're still coming out to this day using that Savage Young Beatles title and quite often the same artwork. Well, the same record company released this, and it's called The Best of the Beatles, or rather Best of the Beatles with no the. And it was deliberately released for people to be confused by, and they'd see it in a record shop, they'd go, oh, there's a new Beatles album, it's called The Best Of, I'll buy that. But it's anything but. It's literally, it's a bad pun designed to shift records. Now, the actual band on this record is the Pete Best combo, and Pete Best, obviously, after he left the Beatles, was thrown out, however you like to tell the tale. I think it's fairly conclusive that he was asked to leave, and the rest you can say is history. Well, his mum, she owned a club called the Casbah in Liverpool, and that's where the Beatles kind of first started playing before they went to the Cavern. And I think she was very instrumental in pushing Pete after he was thrown out of the Beatles to still have a career. And as we will see on this album, the Casbah does get a mention. But this is just such an unusual record. Now, this is the only other release on this Savage Records label. And we'll have just a little close look at this album. Let's look at the sleeve then. And you can see it's a classic photo of the Beatles from Hamburg. But note what they had to do just to make their point. They decided to put a circle around the picture of Pete Best just to make absolutely sure you realised who it was on the cover. Now, this album actually had two releases, and the second pressing actually had a blue circle around Pete Best there, but this is an original, and it's a white circle. However, in order to try and push the Beatles things as much as they could, they had this photo from Hamburg with George, John, Paul and Stuart. And so anyone looking at that at first glance, especially seeing Paul there, will think it's an actual Beatles record. But then at the bottom, you've got the track listings. And as we see, it's not really a set of Beatles songs, although some other guy, which was a cover version of the Beatles, used to do in the Cavern, he's performed here. But yeah, it's definitely not our greatest hits of the Beatles. Now, who were the musicians on this album? Well, Pete Best obviously was playing the drums. The bass guitar was by a Liverpudlian musician called Wayne Bickerton. And the guitar and vocals was a guy called Tony Waddington, who was from North Wales. Now, Tony Waddington actually became quite involved in one of the American Performing Rights Societies, which is quite ironic considering that this album did everything it could to try and avoid the Performing Rights Societies of the day. And I'll show you for why when I turn the cover over. For one thing, on the back cover, there's no credits for any of the music. And if we take the record out the sleeve, you can see on the label that there's no credits for any composers or musicians on the label. All there is a production credit for a Bob Gallio, who arranged and produced the tracks. Now, as we look at the first bit of text on the sleeve, it says, "The Pete Best story, yes, it's really best of the Beatles. The fabulous drummer from the Beatles." And the fact that they made a big thing about the Casbah before the Cavern would suggest that Pete's mum probably had some sort of involvement in this album and wanting to stand her ground about her club. Now, we have 3 photographs here. I can't quite work out who the other people are in the photograph, but I'm presuming that could be his band. I've no idea. But then we've got a bit of blurb about Pete Best and the Beatles down here. And they basically talk about, you know, the Cavern and the birth of the Mersey Beat and all that sort of stuff. This section here is actually quite amusing because they talk about the Cavern first opened its doors in 1957, shock horror as a jazz club, exclamation mark. And then he starts talking about the first band to play there was Roy Storm and the Hurricanes with Ringo Starr on drums. And what's more, the group was fined 10 shillings each by the management for playing a rock and roll number. Well, whether that was true or not, I don't know, but that seems a bit weird. But they obviously wanted to get a little dig at Ringo into the album sleeve. Then they just start talking about the Silver Beatles and various other bits and bobs. And I mentioned there about Stuart Sutcliffe. Interestingly, it says here, "For more details of this drummer, turn the page." So I'm wondering if this text was actually taken out of a book or a pamphlet and they've literally just reproduced the information on the sleeve, because there's certainly no pages to turn here, it's just a pasted on slick. And very much high attention to detail at the end, saying this album contains the best of best, drums like you've never heard before. Well, I think you probably have heard drums like this before, to be honest. And it's listen to 12 grat new tunes by Best of the Beatles. Well, these grat new tunes are actually mostly cover versions and songs that were written by the band for this album. And I'm going to give this a little play. Well then, I've played Best of the Beatles, and I still can't stop laughing about the title. I mean, had it actually been called Pete Best from the Beatles, or Pete Best X the Beatles or something like that, they might have got away with it, but calling it Best of the Beatles is ambiguous at best, and I think they may well have actually had some legal troubles with this LP. I tried to do some research on this, and the only thing I could find was there was an eBay listing from years ago where they did mention something about a New York court hearing, which might have been why this album never got released any further. Anyway, as for the music, well, it's quite an interesting record. It's not what I expected. I kind of expected some kind of generic, trying to sound like the Beatles / Mersey Beat sound, you know, maybe with a bit of Dave Clark 5 chucked in, or, you know, other bands of the era. But this album actually has quite an American feel to it. You know, I'm pretty sure this must have been recorded in America because it just has that vibe about it. And I made some notes about the tracks on the album. The first track's called Last Night, and that's got quite a sort of trippy sort of sound to it, a bit of fuzz guitar on there. And that's followed by a Motown-y sounding song called Why Did You Leave Me? Now that's an original Waddington and Bickerton track, and they actually wrote 4 of the tracks on the album. Then there's Shimmy Like My Sister Kate with plenty of fuzz guitar on that, and there's also got the previous track actually also had some vibraphone on it, which was quite nice. Then there's another original track called Need Your Loving. This kind of sounded a bit like the Monkees. And then there was another song following it called Nobody But You, and that's a Phil Spector sounding song. Again, that's one of the tracks where Wikipedia doesn't actually have a track listing for it. And then there's another Motown sounding song called I Can Do Without You that follows it, which is, yeah, it's got a good little sound. It sort of has a bit of a feel of the you know, the Motown-y 60s thing, which is why I think this was recorded in America. Then we get to the last track, which is called Casting My Spell, which has kind of got a bit of a frantic Yardbirds feel to it. Then we've got side 2, which starts with a song called Wait and See, which is again sort of psychedelic pop, but it's got a bit of a Ringo drum feel to it. You know the break that Ringo does in Ticket to Ride? Well, he's got that on here, which is quite nice. Then there's Some Other Guy, which of course is the Leber and Stoller song, which the Beatles played a lot in their early days. And that's a very faithful kind of cover of how the Beatles did their arrangement of it. Then there's a song called I'm Blue, which is an Ike Turner number. Again, very 60s beat. You could imagine it being used as the title music on Beat Club, the TV show. Then there's another song called She's Alright, another original, which has some sax playing on it. And then the last track is called Keys to My Heart. Now, this has taken the riff of We Gotta Get Out of This Place, you know, the old Animals song, absolutely note for note, and then it's got a different chorus. So yeah, the Pete Best story, Best of the Beatles. Now, the other really weird thing about this album is it's never been reissued. It got repressed again in 1971, and it was very similar to the original, except they had a blue circle around the picture of Pete Best, and it had a slightly different print on the label. I think it had, if you look at the actual label, I think it's got one side it has BM71 and on the other side it says BM72, and I think the latter pressings have BM72 on both sides. But yeah, that's it. Best of the Beatles, not the Alan Partridge favourite Beatles compilation, but a rather obscure and not really heard of Beatles album. Now, as I said, this has never been reissued, but I have found a playlist to this on YouTube, and I will put a link to that playlist on the description of the video. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like and subscribe. As I said, when I bought this album, I bought a load of other American Beatles albums, and I might do a video on those because they're quite fun and quite interesting. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe as always, and I'll catch you on the next one.